On a fog-covered bridge, when the train whistle cuts through the night, most people keep walking. A retired Navy SEAL did not, because his dog stopped, stiffened, and refused to move. The woman on the railing said she was just signing papers, and kindness stood nearby wearing a smile. What followed was not a murder mystery, but something quieter and far more dangerous. This is a story about how evil can hide behind gentle words, and how faith sometimes arrives without a sound. It's about losing honor, losing a dog, and discovering that staying can be an act of courage. If stories of loyalty, faith, and quiet miracles matter to you, please like this video, subscribe to Silent Paws Steady Hearts, and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Night had laid its thin shroud over the iron bridge, a veil of mist drifting low like a funeral cloth left behind by a careless god. Sodium lamps cast their tired yellow pools along the steel ribs, and the river below swallowed reflections without sound. Then the train whistle tore through the fog, long, metallic, merciless, like a spear hurled by Ares himself, striking an old wound that Gideon Crow never learned to cauterize. He stopped walking mid-step. Gideon stood tall without effort, a man just over 6 feet, whose posture seemed carved into him rather than learned. His shoulders were broad, his frame compact and functional, the kind of strength built for endurance rather than spectacle. The olive-green combat shirt clung naturally to his torso, the camouflage sleeves darkened by mist. His face was weathered in a way that spoke of sun, wind, and years of listening to danger before it arrived. Short tactical hair, dark brown streaked with early silver at the temples, sat neat against his skull, and a disciplined stubble framed a jaw that rarely softened. His eyes, blue-gray and alert, reflected the bridge lights like cold water catching fire. Beside him, the dog stopped too. Morrow was a German shepherd in his later working years, large and powerfully built. His weight settled low and steady through all 4 legs. His coat lay dense and close, black across his back and shoulders, fading into warm tan along his chest and legs. One ear twitched forward, then the other. His head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring, as if the night itself had spoken a language only he could hear. He did not bark. He never barked unless barking mattered. Instead, his muscles tightened, the fur along his neck rising like a quiet warning written in flesh. Morrow leaned into the leash, not a tug, not a panic. Just weight, firm, deliberate, pressing Gideon backward. "Easy," Gideon murmured, his voice low and roughened by disuse, the way old engines sound when they've been running too long without oil. He followed the line of the dog's attention, eyes adjusting through the fog. That was when he saw her. She stood at the railing, one thin hand wrapped around cold metal, the other clutching a paper bag swollen with documents. She was small, stooped slightly by years, her gray hair pinned back with care that suggested pride rather than vanity. A beige coat hung from her narrow shoulders, too light for the damp night. The wind teased loose strands of hair across her face, and her lips moved as if she were reciting instructions she no longer trusted herself to remember. "They said it was only a signature," she whispered, to no one in particular. "Just signing. Then I go home." Her name was Elowen Hart, though Gideon would not learn that yet. What he saw was a woman in her mid-70s, skin pale and lined like folded parchment, eyes clouded not with blindness, but with fear that had nowhere left to run. Morrow stopped pulling and froze. The dog's tail lowered, his body angled between Gideon and the woman, not blocking her, but guarding something invisible, an unseen threshold the way old sentries once guarded temple doors. Gideon took a step forward. "Ma'am," he said gently, raising one hand, palm open. "Please, step back from the railing." She turned at the sound of his voice. Her eyes were watery, but sharp enough to take him in, the uniform, the dog, the height, the calm that did not belong to men who meant harm. "Who are you?" she asked. Are you one of them?" Before Gideon could answer, footsteps approached from behind her. A man emerged from the fog wearing a reflective vest, the kind road crews used. He was average height, clean-shaven, with kind eyes and a practiced smile that settled easily into place. His posture leaned forward slightly, as if always ready to help someone carry something heavy. "There you are," the man said warmly. "I was worried you'd wandered off again." He extended a hand toward the woman. "Come on, ma'am. Let's get you home." Morrow growled. It was barely a sound, more vibration than threat. But it stopped the man mid-step. Gideon moved without thinking, placing himself between the man and the woman, his stance relaxed but immovable. He had learned long ago that the difference between violence and control often lay in where you placed your feet. "Hold it," Gideon said. "She stays right here." The smile on the man's face thinned, then vanished entirely, replaced by something sharp and rehearsed. "Sir, you're harassing an elderly woman," he said loudly, his voice pitched to carry. "Step away!" The train whistle screamed again, closer this time, the sound ricocheting through Gideon's skull like shrapnel. The woman flinched, her hand slipping on the railing. She stumbled. Gideon lunged. His fingers closed around her wrist just as her weight tipped forward, the paper bag tearing open as documents spilled across the bridge deck. He pulled her back hard, steadying her against his chest as the train thundered past, the bridge trembling under its fury. By the time the noise faded, the man in the reflective vest was gone. Gideon lowered the woman gently to a seated position against the railing, his body shielding her from the drop below. Morrow stood watch, head high, eyes locked on the fog where the man had vanished, his growl gone, but his attention unbroken. The woman's breathing came in sharp bursts. Gideon crouched beside her, careful, patient. "You're safe," he said. "I've got you." Her gaze drifted to the scattered papers at their feet. One page lay face up, stamped and signed in careful ink. Gideon picked it up, his eyes catching the bold heading at the top. Bright Haven Outreach. The signature beneath it was elegant, too elegant, curving confidently across the line, utterly at odds with the tremor he had felt in her wrist. A faint scent reached him then, threading through the damp air. Floral, sweet, artificial. It didn't belong on a bridge at night. Morrow lowered his head and sniffed the paper, then lifted his gaze to Gideon, eyes dark and knowing. Something was wrong. They took her to the small medical station near the bridge, a squat concrete building that smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. The nurse on duty called a legal aid volunteer, and that was how Rowan Pike entered the night. Rowan was in her early 40s, tall and lean, her posture confident without being rigid. Dark hair streaked with gray was pulled into a low bun at the nape of her neck, and wire-rimmed glasses framed sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a wool coat over a blouse and slacks, practical clothes chosen for long hours and unpredictable calls. There was a warmth to her presence, but it was a disciplined warmth, guarded by experience. She knelt to gather the scattered documents, her movements precise. "These signatures," she said quietly, scanning the page. "They're too clean. People in distress don't sign like this." Elowen leaned toward her, voice trembling. "They smelled nice," she whispered. "Like flowers. And the sharp smell, like the doctor's office." Rowan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Before she could respond, another man stepped into the room. Deke Ransom filled the doorway with practiced authority. He was in his late 50s, thick-set, his face ruddy from years outdoors. His uniform was immaculate, his badge polished. He smiled readily, but his eyes were flat, assessing. "Everything all right here?" he asked. His gaze flicked to Gideon, then to Morrow, lingering a moment too long. "We got a call about a disturbance." Gideon said nothing. He had learned that silence often invited people to reveal themselves. Deke chuckled softly. "Good thing you were here to help, son. But we don't want misunderstandings, do we?" Morrow met Deke's stare without blinking. The room felt suddenly smaller. The next morning, Gideon woke to his phone vibrating endlessly on the table. A video was spreading fast. Grainy footage of him on the bridge, cropped tight, his voice muted. The moment of rescue missing entirely. The caption was simple and devastating. "Unstable veteran harasses elderly woman." Comments poured in. Fear, anger, smiling faces holding knives. Gideon stared at the screen, then set the phone down slowly. Outside, a train whistle sounded again. Distant this time, but sharp enough to draw blood all the same. Morrow stood at the door, waiting. The night had not finished with them yet. Morning arrived without mercy. The fog that had wrapped the iron bridge the night before had thinned into a dull gray haze. But the town beneath it looked no cleaner for the sunlight. Gideon Crow sat at the small kitchen table of his rented house, a narrow place perched close enough to the tracks that every passing train rattled the windows like loose bones. The video was still on his phone screen, paused on a frame where his broad shoulders and military posture looked more threatening than protective. The comments scrolled endlessly beneath it, strangers shaping him into something sharp and dangerous with their words. He turned the phone face down. Morrow lay at his feet, long body stretched along the cool wooden floor, black and tan fur rising and falling with slow, even breaths. The dog was awake. He always was. But his eyes were half-lidded, watchful rather than restless. His ears twitched each time a distant horn sounded, not in fear, but in recognition, like a man counting familiar footsteps in the dark. Gideon rubbed a hand over his face and stood. Strength came easily to him. Rest did not. By the time Rowan Pike knocked on the door, the coffee had gone cold. She stepped inside without ceremony, shrugging off her coat. In daylight, she looked sharper than she had under the medical station's fluorescent lights. Her posture was upright, her movements economical, as if she disliked wasting effort on anything that did not matter. The faint lines at the corners of her eyes suggested someone who had learned to smile through disappointment rather than surrender to it. "You can't punch your way out of this," she said, glancing at the phone without touching it. "I know you weren't planning to, but I'm saying it anyway." Gideon met her gaze, unoffended. Wasn't planning on punching anyone. "Good." She pulled a folder from her bag and set it on the table. "Because this is how you win." Inside were photocopies and notes, names underlined, dates circled, addresses crossed out. Rowan spoke as she flipped through the pages, her voice calm, precise. "Over the past 18 months, 7 people in this county have technically not gone missing. They signed documents, perfectly legal ones on paper, power of attorney, temporary guardianship, financial representation, all framed as help." She paused, tapping one page with her finger. 4 of them were over 70. 2 were homeless. 1 was living alone with early cognitive decline. All of them lost control of their benefits within 3 months. 3 lost their homes. Gideon leaned over the table, eyes narrowing. "And Brighthaven?" "Not listed directly." Rowan's mouth tightened. "That's the trick. They sit one step away. Referrals. Support. Outreach. But the same names keep appearing on the edges." She slid a page toward him. A signature. Clean, looping, confident. Gideon thought of Elowin's shaking hand on the bridge. Before he could speak, there was a knock. Harder this time. Official. Detective Naya Calder introduced herself with a clipped nod, and a badge flashed just long enough to register. She was in her early 40s, athletic without softness, dark hair cut short at the jaw. Her face was angular, her eyes dark and measuring. the kind that missed nothing but forgave very little. The leather jacket she wore looked lived in, creased at the elbows, smelling faintly of rain and cigarettes. "I'm not here because I like you," she said to Gideon, wasting no breath. "I'm here because I don't like coincidences." She took the empty chair, setting a notepad on the table but not opening it. Her gaze flicked to Morrow, who lifted his head, ears forward. "That dog always look at people like that?" she asked. "Only when they're breathing," Gideon replied. A corner of her mouth twitched despite herself. Nia leaned back. "Here's what I know. Elder exploitation cases don't wear masks. They wear smiles. They hide behind churches, nonprofits, legal language. And every time someone thinks it's just kindness, another bank account gets emptied." She looked at Rowan. "You've got patterns. I've got suspicions. What I don't have yet is probable cause." Rowan nodded. "We're working on it." That was when Morrow stood. The movement was unhurried, deliberate. He crossed the room to the door, nose low, tail steady. He sniffed once, then let out a low, brief huff. Not a warning, not fear. Recognition. A moment later, a truck rumbled past outside. Gideon's gaze followed the sound instinctively. The engine note was wrong. Too rough. Uneven. A van, maybe. Old. He felt it more than heard it, the way some men feel storms in their joints. Morrow returned to Gideon's side and sat, eyes fixed on the window. Nia noticed. She wrote something down for the first time. Later that afternoon, they drove together, Gideon at the wheel, Rowan in the passenger seat, Nia in back, past the bridge and deeper into the older parts of town. Morrow rode in the rear, posture relaxed but alert, head angled toward the open window. As they passed a thrift store and a shuttered clinic, a figure stepped out onto the sidewalk, a woman with a silk scarf at her neck, floral and bright against the drab street. She laughed into her phone, voice light. Morrow stiffened. His ears snapped forward, his head turning sharply, nostrils flaring. A soft sound left his throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Rowan glanced back. "What is it?" Gideon slowed the car. The woman disappeared into a doorway, but the scent lingered faintly, sweet and synthetic. "Same smell?" Gideon said quietly. Nia's pen scratched across paper. "Perfume isn't a crime." "No," Rowan agreed. "But repetition is a language." That night, Gideon returned to the bridge alone. The fog crept in early, hugging the steel beams. The whistle sounded on schedule, loud enough to drown out thought. Gideon stood with his hands on the cold railing, eyes closed, letting the sound wash through him. In his mind, it wasn't a train, it was a call. A warning that never came early enough. Morrow stood beside him, gaze fixed on the far end of the bridge. Then, the dog did something strange. He lay down. Right there, in the middle of the walkway, placing his body broadside across Gideon's path, blocking him from moving forward. He did not look afraid. He did not look aggressive. He looked resolute, like a door that refused to open. Gideon frowned. "What are you doing?" Morrow did not move. Instead, his head turned slightly toward the shadows near the railing, where Elowin had stood the night before. Gideon followed his line of sight and saw nothing, but felt something tighten in his chest. He stayed where he was, breathing, waiting. Moments later, a van rolled slowly past the bridge entrance. Its lights dimmed. It did not stop. It did not need to. Morrow rose only after it was gone. The next morning, Rowan called him from the hospital. "Elowin's worse," she said. "She keeps asking why her house smells like flowers." Gideon closed his eyes. Time, he realized, was not on their side. It never had been. Brighthaven Outreach occupied a renovated brick building two blocks from the river, far enough from the iron bridge to feel respectable, close enough to claim relevance. Morning light filtered through tall windows dressed in sheer curtains, turning dust into something almost holy. The lobby smelled of brewed tea, citrus cleaner, and faint lavender, an intentional blend meant to soften the nervous and reassure the uncertain. A volunteer piano track drifted through hidden speakers, slow and gentle, each note lingering just long enough to feel sincere. Gideon Crow stepped inside and immediately felt the wrongness settle in his chest. He moved the way he always did in unfamiliar spaces, slow, observant, shoulders relaxed, but ready. The olive green combat shirt and camouflage sleeves marked him as someone out of place here. Though no one said it aloud, people rarely confronted things that made them uncomfortable when politeness offered an escape. His blue-gray eyes tracked exits, reflections, corners where sound gathered. Beside him, Morrow padded in silence, large paws soundless against polished tile, his presence drawing glances that lingered a fraction too long. Morrow looked every inch the working dog he was, broad-chested, steady, black saddle stark against warm tan fur. But there was no aggression in him. His mouth hung slightly open, tongue relaxed, ears upright and attentive. He radiated composure, the kind earned through years of discipline rather than fear. Children would have trusted him instantly. So would people who had nothing left to lose. Rowan Pike walked at Gideon's side, her posture professional, her expression open but alert. She wore a dark blazer over a soft blouse, clothes chosen to signal authority without intimidation. Her eyes moved constantly, reading the room the way other people read faces. She accepted a paper cup of tea from a volunteer with a nod and a polite smile that cost her nothing and revealed even less. Then, Silas Brandt appeared. He emerged from a side hallway with the timing of a practiced host, tall and neatly dressed, silver hair combed back from a high forehead. His face was smooth, his jaw clean-shaven, his smile warm without being intimate. He moved with an easy confidence, the kind cultivated by years of being thanked. "Welcome to Bright Haven," he said, extending his hand to Rowan first. His voice was calm, low, carrying the reassuring cadence of someone used to being trusted. "I'm Silas." Rowan shook his hand. Gideon did not. Silas noticed, of course. People like him always did. He let the omission pass as if it were nothing. "And who's this handsome fellow?" Silas added, glancing down at Morrow. "I've always loved dogs. They have such pure hearts." Morrow stopped walking. Not abruptly, not tensely. He simply halted, positioning his body slightly in front of Gideon's legs, head lifting, ears forward. His gaze fixed on Silas, not with hostility, but with something closer to assessment. His tail stilled. Silas chuckled lightly. "Strong one, isn't he?" "He's trained," Gideon said. The words came out flat, factual. "So am I." Silas's smile did not waver, but something behind his eyes flickered, brief as a match struck and snuffed. They spoke at a small round table near the front windows. Rowan explained her interest in outreach documentation, in patterns of guardianship assistance and financial advocacy. Silas listened attentively, nodding, fingers steepled loosely in front of him. He spoke of compassion, of burdens lifted, of people who simply needed someone to help them navigate a confusing world. "We don't take advantage of anyone," he said softly. "We guide them." Rowan asked for pamphlets, intake forms, referrals, everything that could be given legally, politely. Silas obliged with ease, rising to retrieve materials from behind the reception desk. As he did, Gideon noticed Morrow's head turn, nose lifting slightly. Behind the desk, a narrow hallway led to a single metal door, painted beige to blend into the wall. It was locked. The air around it smelled different, sharper, layered beneath the lavender and citrus. Gideon recognized it without understanding how. Stress sweat, disinfectant alcohol, plastic. Morrow stepped forward and stopped directly in front of the door. He did not bark. He did not growl. He stood. His body became an obstacle, broad and unmoving, as if rooted to the floor. The line of his spine was straight, his weight evenly distributed. He blocked the door not aggressively, but absolutely. Gideon felt a chill pass through him. For a moment, absurdly, the image of a desecrated altar flashed through his mind. A place violated not by blood, but by intent. Silas returned, pamphlets in hand. His eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Rowan. "He seems protective," Silas said. Rowan smiled politely. "He has good instincts." Silas laughed, just a touch too loudly. "Don't we all?" Morrow's throat vibrated with a low sound, barely audible, more felt than heard. Gideon rested a hand lightly on the dog's neck, not to restrain him, but to acknowledge what he already knew. Rowan gathered the documents, thanked Silas, and stood. Gideon followed, guiding Morrow gently away from the door. As they turned to leave, Gideon caught his reflection in the glass. His own face hard, unreadable, eyes darker than he remembered. Outside, the street felt suddenly colder. They walked a block before Rowan spoke. "That door," she said quietly. "Did you feel it too?" Gideon nodded. "Something's behind it. Something that doesn't want to be found." Before Gideon could respond, a voice called his name. "Gideon?" He turned. Juno Hart stood across the street, one hand clutching a recorder, the other shoved into the pocket of a denim jacket, faded by sun and wear. She was in her late 20s, slender, with curly dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail that refused to behave. Her skin was olive-toned, her eyes bright with a mix of determination and exhaustion. She carried herself with the nervous energy of someone who lived on deadlines and unanswered questions. "My grandmother," she said, crossing toward him. "Elowen, I'm Juno." Her voice wavered only slightly. They sat at a nearby cafe, windows fogged by the steam of espresso machines. Juno spoke quickly, words tumbling over one another, as if afraid time might interrupt. "I run a local podcast," she said. "Mostly small-town stuff. But people started messaging me about the bridge, about folks who vanish after being seen there. I started tracking dates." She slid her phone across the table, showing a calendar marked with red circles. "Every disappearance lines up with nights when freight trains pass through after midnight." Rowan leaned closer. "You're sure?" Juno nodded. "It's like clockwork." Gideon felt Morrow shift beneath the table, his head pressing briefly against Gideon's knee, grounding him. Outside, across the street, a man leaned against a parked car, pretending to scroll through his phone. He looked ordinary, cap pulled low, jacket zipped up, but he didn't move when the light changed. Gideon's eyes met his. The man looked away too quickly. Morrow noticed. The dog's body tensed, a subtle change, his ears angling toward the window. He let out a quiet, insistent sound and nudged Gideon's leg again. Harder this time. Gideon stood. "We need to go." As they left the cafe, the man by the car slipped inside a nearby building, but Gideon had already seen enough. He smelled it too now, the faint trace of floral perfume, clinging to the air like a fingerprint. Back at Rowan's car, she opened the folder Silas had given her. Inside, tucked between glossy pamphlets, was a plain white envelope. Rowan froze. She lifted it slowly, inhaling once. The scent was unmistakable. Sweet, synthetic, too strong for paper. Morrow growled softly and pulled at the leash, urging Gideon away from the building, away from the street. Gideon took the envelope from Rowan's hand, his jaw tightening. Someone had been watching. Someone wanted them to find this. And someone did not want them to stay. By noon, Gideon Crow's name had become a shorthand for fear. It spread the way rumors always did in small towns, quietly at first, then all at once, through Facebook groups with earnest names, comment sections thick with righteous concern, and local message boards where strangers spoke as if they had known him all their lives. The clip from the bridge had been reposted again, this time with a longer caption and a warning tone, the words chosen carefully to sound reasonable rather than cruel. Unstable veteran, aggressive behavior, threat to vulnerable people. It was not an accusation shouted in anger, but a verdict delivered with polite smiles. Gideon sat on the edge of his bed, boots still on, staring at the wall across from him. His house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant rattle of a passing freight train. He had learned in war that there were noises you could tune out and noises you could not. This one threaded itself into his chest and stayed there. Morrow lay at his feet, long body curved protectively toward him, chin resting on his paws. The German shepherd's eyes were open, tracking Gideon's breathing rather than the room. At 6 or 7 years old, Morrow carried the calm gravity of a veteran himself, muscles still powerful beneath his dense black and tan coat, movements economical, expression thoughtful. He sensed tension the way other dogs sensed storms. Gideon's phone buzzed again. He did not answer it. The knock at the door was harder than usual, authoritative without being violent. Gideon stood, squared his shoulders, and opened it. Deke Ransom filled the doorway with a familiar, almost neighborly presence. He wore his uniform as if it were a second skin, every crease pressed, badge catching the light. His hair was graying at the temples, his face broad and ruddy, his smile practiced into something that resembled concern. "Afternoon, Gideon," Deke said. "Mind if I come in?" Gideon stepped aside. Deke glanced around the room, his eyes flicking briefly to Morrow before returning to Gideon's face. "We've had a complaint," he said, folding his hands together. "Anonymous, but detailed. Allegations of threatening behavior toward a homeless individual near the bridge." Gideon said nothing. "For everyone's safety," Deke continued, his tone measured, "we're issuing a temporary restriction. You're not to be on or near the bridge after dark, just until things cool down." "And if they don't?" Gideon asked quietly. Deke sighed, as if burdened by responsibility. "Then we reassess." Morrow stood and moved closer to Gideon, his shoulder brushing Gideon's knee. Deke noticed the motion and took a subtle step back, his smile tightening. After he left, the house felt smaller. Rowan Pike called an hour later, her voice controlled but tight around the edges. She was in her office, a narrow space lined with filing cabinets and mismatched chairs, sunlight slanting across stacks of paperwork that never seemed to shrink. "They're suing," she said. "Brighthaven filed a complaint this morning. Claims I'm harassing them, damaging their reputation." Gideon closed his eyes. "You okay?" "I've been called worse by better people," Rowan replied. Then, softer, "But this is deliberate. They're trying to isolate you. And me." A knock sounded on her office door. Rowan covered the phone briefly, then returned. "I've got someone here. I'll call you back." The someone turned out to be Tate Bellinger. Tate was in his early 30s, thin to the point of looking unfinished, with pale skin that never seemed to tan and hair the color of dust, always falling into his eyes. He wore a county-issued jacket several sizes too large, sleeves pushed up to reveal wrists marked by old grease stains. His posture suggested someone used to hunching over monitors rather than standing his ground. "I shouldn't be here," he said quietly, hands twisting together. "But I saw something off." Rowan listened without interrupting. "I handle traffic and bridge cams," Tate continued. "The night of the incident, there were 2 angles, one main feed, one auxiliary from a maintenance pole." He swallowed. "The auxiliary file's gone, not corrupted, deleted." Rowan's gaze sharpened. "Who has access?" Tate hesitated. "Officially, maintenance, security, a few admins. Unofficially went unsaid. That evening, Detective Nia Calder found Gideon sitting on the steps outside his house, Morrow beside him, watching the sky darken. "You're being baited," she said without preamble, lighting a cigarette she never seemed to finish. Her dark eyes studied him, weighing reactions. "They want you angry. They want you sloppy." "I don't get sloppy," Gideon said. Nia snorted. "Everyone does when you hit the right nerve." She flicked ash into the dirt. "And for you, that nerve has a name." "Eloan," Gideon replied. Nia nodded. "They know your history now. Military records aren't as sealed as people think. They know about the mission where you arrived too late." The words landed like a physical blow. "Whatever you do next," Nia said, her voice dropping, "you make sure it's boring. No heroics." That night, Gideon dreamed of doors he could not open and voices he could hear but not reach. He woke to a vibration on his phone, a message from an unknown number. "They're taking Eloan to sign again tonight." Gideon sat up so fast the room tilted. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the sound of the passing train. He read the message again, then a third time, as if repetition might change its meaning. Morrow was already on his feet. The dog moved with purpose now, pacing toward the door, then back to Gideon, then to the door again. His ears were forward, his tail stiff, a low sound rumbling in his chest. Not fear, not aggression, but urgency. Gideon grabbed his jacket. He did not go to the bridge. He did not go to Brighthaven. He went to the parking lot behind the small notary office near the river, the place Rowan had mentioned in passing, where guardianship papers were often finalized after hours. He told himself he was only there to observe, to note license plates, to gather information the right way. The lot was dim, lit by a single flickering lamp. A white van idled near the back, engine rough, uneven. Gideon crouched behind a dumpster, heart steady despite the rush in his veins. Morrow stayed close, body pressed low to the ground, eyes locked on the vehicle. Then came the sound, a dull thud. Once, twice, then a voice, muffled, desperate. "Help, please." Gideon froze. Every instinct screamed at him to move. Every warning Nia had given echoed in his head. He looked down at Morrow. The dog's gaze met his, steady and unblinking. He did not pull. He did not whine. He waited. The thud came again, louder. Gideon moved. He crossed the distance in seconds, yanking the van's side door handle. It was locked. He struck the window with his elbow, the glass spiderwebbing, then shattering inward. Inside, a young man cowered, eyes wild, wrists bound loosely with plastic ties. Gideon hauled him out just as lights flared. "Police!" someone shouted. Cameras appeared from the shadows. A woman screamed. A man with a phone held high narrated loudly about an attack. Another figure stepped forward, shaking his head with theatrical concern. Within moments, Gideon was face down on the asphalt, hands cuffed behind him. Morrow barked once, sharp, furious, as two men restrained him with practiced motions, shouting about an aggressive dog. As Gideon was lifted to his feet, he caught sight of the van's open door, the terrified young man being ushered away by strangers who spoke softly and smiled too much. And Gideon understood, with terrible clarity, that the net had closed exactly where they wanted it to. The holding room smelled of bleach and old fear. Gideon Crow sat on a hard plastic bench bolted to the floor, elbows on his knees, hands clasped as if prayer were still a language he remembered. The cuffs were gone, but their absence did not feel like freedom. Across the room, a wall clock ticked with the patience of something that would outlast him. Somewhere beyond the concrete, a train horn sounded, distant, steady, and Gideon felt the familiar pull in his chest, the question that never stopped asking itself whether he had arrived too late again. When the door opened, It was not Detective Nia Calder who stepped in, nor Deke Ransom with his careful smile. It was a woman in a dark green uniform with an animal control patch stitched over her heart. Officer Lena Griggs moved with a quiet efficiency, average height, sturdy build, her sandy blonde hair pulled into a tight braid that brushed the back of her collar. Her face was weathered by sun and wind, freckled across the nose, eyes a clear gray that missed very little. She carried a clipboard under one arm and a calm that felt earned, not borrowed. When she spoke, her voice was level, practiced, the kind that steadied animals and people alike. "Mr. Crow," she said, "I'm here about your dog." Gideon stood so quickly, the bench scraped the floor. "Where is he?" "In observation," Lena replied. "Standard protocol." "Protocol based on what?" Lena met his gaze without flinching. "A complaint. A video. A reported bite." Gideon's jaw tightened. "He didn't bite anyone." "I know," she said, surprising him, but knowing and proving are different things. She flipped the clipboard open and continued, professional but not cold. "The complainant claims a puncture wound. The video shows your dog barking and lunging. The timestamps are convenient." Gideon exhaled slowly. "You think it's staged?" "I think," Lena said carefully, "that I've worked with aggressive dogs for 15 years. And I've worked with scared liars for longer. Your dog didn't look like either." She led him down a narrow hallway lined with chain-link enclosures. The air changed as they walked. Less chemical, more animal. Fur, disinfectant, and the low hum of restrained energy. Dogs barked, whined, paced. Cats hissed from covered carriers. The building felt like a waiting room for judgment. Morrow's enclosure was near the end. He stood when he saw Gideon. Large frame unfolding smoothly, tail lifting but not wagging wildly. His ears were up, eyes bright, body composed. No frantic jumping, no panic. He stepped forward, nose touching the fence, a soft sound escaping his throat. His throat that Gideon felt in his ribs. Lena watched closely. "You see that?" she said quietly. "That's not a dog who's out of control. That's a dog asking a question." Gideon swallowed. "Can I talk to him?" She nodded. "Keep it calm." Gideon crouched, pressing his forehead lightly to the fence. "You did good," he murmured. "You did exactly right." Morrow's breathing slowed, matching Gideon's. He sat, posture straight, eyes never leaving Gideon's face. Lena made a note on her clipboard. "I'll file my assessment," she said. "Behaviorally sound. No signs of aggression beyond provocation. But there's a hold until the investigation clears." "How long?" Gideon asked. "Could be days," she replied. "Could be longer." Gideon nodded once. He had waited longer for worse things. Outside, the afternoon light felt thin and sharp. Gideon walked free of the station with nothing in his hands and too much missing at his side. The world noticed. People crossed the street. A woman pulled her child closer. Someone whispered his name like it was a diagnosis. He went home alone. That night, the train whistles came more often. Without Morrow's steady presence, the sounds cut deeper, threading themselves through Gideon's memories. He lay awake on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, seeing flashes of another night, another rescue that had come seconds too late. He wondered if this was how penance worked. Not dramatic punishment, but quiet subtraction. Rowan Pike arrived the next morning, eyes shadowed, shoulders squared like someone bracing for impact. She set a paper bag of coffee on the table and did not sit. "I lost a case once," she said abruptly. "A man named Harold Weiss, 78, mild dementia. His neighbor helped him sign a guardianship agreement." Gideon listened, unmoving. "I caught it too late," Rowan continued. "By the time I challenged it, Harold was in a temporary housing unit with no heat. He died there. Heart failure. The case was closed. Clean." Her voice did not waver, but her hands curled into fists. That's when I learned how dangerous polite words can be. Gideon nodded. I know the feeling. The phone rang. It was the hospital. Elowyn Hart had been admitted overnight after wandering from her room. Rowan and Gideon drove together in silence, the city passing like a blur of missed chances. In the hospital room, Elowyn lay small against white sheets, her gray hair fanned across the pillow. The machines hummed softly, indifferent. She stirred when Gideon took her hand. You smell like iron, she murmured. Like the bridge. Rowan leaned close. Elowyn, do you remember the people who helped you with the papers? Elowyn frowned, eyes searching the ceiling. The flowers, she whispered. They smelled like church, like lilies, and the sharp smell, like when they clean before you see the doctor. Gideon felt something click into place. Rowan's eyes met his. Lilies, she said softly. Funeral flowers. Elowyn sighed and drifted back into sleep. They left out the hospital heavier than they arrived. Later that afternoon, Gideon sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the empty space by the door where Morrow's leash hung unused. The phone buzzed with a message from Juno Hart. I found something. Can we meet? They met at the edge of the park near the river, wind tugging at the trees. Juno looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy knot. She held her phone out without preamble. It was a photograph from a charity fundraiser 2 years earlier. Silas Brandt stood at the center, smiling warmly, one hand resting on the shoulder of Deke Ransom. To the side stood a woman in a black dress, a silk scarf knotted at her throat, floral and bright against the dark fabric. Her posture was elegant, her expression serene. Gideon stared at the scarf. Rowan inhaled sharply. That's it, Juno nodded. She's in a lot of photos, always nearby, always smiling. Gideon closed his eyes. In his mind, the pieces aligned, not into justice yet, but into clarity. The perfume, the paperwork, the cameras, the baited text message, the staged bite. It was all too clean, too careful. He opened his eyes. If we keep playing by their rules, he said slowly, they'll keep winning. Rowan looked at him, understanding dawning. What are you thinking? That sometimes, Gideon replied, voice steady, the only way to protect the truth is to let it burn you. In the distance, a train whistle sounded, long, low, inevitable. And Gideon knew that to save Morrow, to save Elowyn, to save the people who did not know they were being led away, he might have to give up the last thing he had left. His name. The work of building truth was quieter than Gideon Crow had imagined. There were no dramatic confrontations in the beginning, no raised voices or broken doors. Instead, there were long tables under fluorescent lights, stacks of files, and the slow erosion of lies by numbers that refused to agree with one another. Rowan Pike lived in those hours now, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched down on her nose, pen moving steadily as if each mark were a small act of defiance. Her face, usually composed, carried the tight focus of someone who knew exactly how many lives could be lost to a missed detail. Detective Nia Calder sat across from her, jacket draped over the back of her chair, dark hair pulled away from her sharp features. She looked less like a cop in these moments, and more like an accountant of human damage. Eyes narrowed as she traced money flows across spreadsheets and bank statements. Where Rowan sought legal coherence, Nia sought motive. Together, they built something solid. This isn't about people vanishing, Nia said, tapping a file with one blunt finger. It's about assets moving, benefits changing hands, houses going dark. Rowan nodded. Elder fraud, financial exploitation. If we prove intent and pattern, we don't need a body to get a warrant. They laid it all out. Public assistance records showing beneficiaries changed within weeks of Brighthaven referrals. Guardianship filings signed on dates when medical evaluations later confirmed diminished capacity. The same notary appearing again and again. The same witness names looping through documents like a bad refrain. Addresses listed as temporary housing that traced back to 3 rundown properties owned by shell companies with no staff and the same mailing address. Each piece alone was thin. Together, they weighed something down. Rowan drafted the affidavit late into the night, her handwriting growing tighter as fatigue set in. She wrote carefully, stripping emotion from language that desperately wanted to carry it. By dawn, the probable cause was no longer a theory. It was a map. Gideon watched all of this from the edge of the room, hands clasped behind his back, his presence heavy and restrained. He had offered himself early, knowing what it would cost. "I'll go in," he said when Rowan finished. As a client, Naya studied him for a long moment. No family, no real names, nothing that can come back on you. "I know," Gideon replied. "I'll keep it clean." His cover was simple and believable, a middle-aged man caring for an elderly woman who was starting to forget things, overwhelmed by paperwork, looking for guidance. It was a story Gideon hated how easily he could tell. While Rowan filed for the warrant, Officer Lena Griggs worked her own angles. Animal Control's facility was quieter in the early morning, most of the barking dulled by routine. Lena walked Morrow along the fenced exercise run, clipboard tucked under her arm. In daylight, the German Shepherd's age showed more clearly. The faint silver at his muzzle, the stiffness that eased after a few steps. But his posture remained disciplined, his focus sharp. He moved with the confidence of a dog who knew his purpose. Lena watched him closely as he responded to commands, as he ignored sudden noises, as he returned to her side without hesitation. She crouched to his level, meeting his calm, amber-brown gaze. "You've seen things, haven't you?" she murmured, scratching behind his ear. "Doesn't make you dangerous, makes you careful." Her report reflected that. Stable, responsive, provoked behavior only. With conditions, she was allowed to accompany Morrow to a supervised location later that day. Brighthaven looked the same as it always had. Warm light, soft music, volunteers moving with gentle smiles. Gideon entered alone this time, posture slightly rounded, hands clasped as if unsure where to put them. He wore the same clothes as before, but his presence had shifted. He let uncertainty sit on him, let vulnerability show just enough to be convincing. Silas Brandt greeted him with practiced warmth, silver hair immaculate, eyes attentive. "How can we help today?" Gideon told his story. Slowly, carefully, he spoke of appointments missed, of confusion over bills, of fear of making the wrong choice. Silas listened with sympathetic nods, guiding him toward reassurance, toward trust. He spoke of dignity and care, of easing burdens. From outside, Lena waited with Morrow, following the letter of the agreement that allowed the dog near the building, but not inside. She kept the leash short, her grip steady. Morrow stood quietly at her side, ears twitching as scents layered themselves in his mind. Then he stiffened. It was subtle, a change in breathing, a shift of weight. His head turned toward the rear of the building, toward the area hidden from public view. Lena felt it through the leash. "What is it?" she whispered. Morrow's nose lifted. His body leaned forward, not straining, not panicked, intent. Inside, Gideon felt it too, as Silas gestured him toward a hallway behind the reception desk. Gideon's chest tightened. The air grew sharper, the pleasant lavender overwhelmed by something harsher beneath it. Disinfectant, plastic, fear. They stopped near the same locked door Gideon had noticed before. From outside, Morrow let out a sound so low it barely registered as sound at all. a vibration that traveled through Lena's hand and into her bones. It was not a warning bark. It was recognition. Lena swallowed. Inside, Gideon placed his palm lightly against the wall near the door. He could feel the hum of something active behind it, the weight of secrets pressed close. Silas watched him, head tilted. Is something wrong? No, Gideon said evenly. Just trying to understand. The moment stretched. Then Silas smiled. With a casual motion, he opened the door. The room beyond was small and windowless, lit by a single overhead fixture. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with file boxes labeled in neat handwriting. A metal safe sat bolted to the floor. On a folding table lay a scatter of debit cards, benefit cards, checkbooks. A clipboard hung nearby, listing dates and times. Gideon's gaze caught on the schedule, each entry aligned with nights when freight trains passed through town after midnight. You see, Silas said softly, stepping beside him, resources need coordination. People need guidance. Not everyone can be saved at once. Gideon turned slowly to face him. You think this is saving? He asked. Silas's smile widened, just enough to reveal the steel beneath. I think this is choosing. Outside, Morrow's low sound deepened, echoing faintly through the walls like a judgment spoken too late to stop, but too clear to ignore. The night chose its hour with cruel precision. Freight schedules stacked on one another like dominoes, and when the first train rolled toward the bridge, its whistle cut through the city with a long, aching cry. The sound carried weight tonight. Not prophecy, not doom, but cover. Metal on metal, vibration on steel. Noise enough to swallow shouts and hide the soft crimes that preferred not to be seen. Gideon Crow stood across the street from Brighthaven's rear lot, the olive green of his combat shirt darkened by mist. His posture was calm, but the tension lived deeper now, in muscle memory and breath control. He watched the white vans line up one by one, engines idling low, their sides unmarked, their windows tinted, just enough to blur faces inside. Elderly figures moved slowly toward them, some guided gently by hands that looked kind. Others nudged with paperwork held like permission slips. This was not murder. That was the lie that made it worse. This was borrowing lives through procedure. Rowan Pike's voice crackled softly through the earpiece, hidden beneath Gideon's collar. She was at her office, court filings open on every screen, eyes on a clock that refused to move faster. The warrant is signed, she said. But it's stuck in transit. Judge's clerk is rerouting units now. How long? Gideon asked. A pause. Too long. He closed his eyes for half a second. In that silence, he heard another whistle. Another night. Another place. A radio call that had come 30 seconds too late. He opened his eyes and watched one of the elderly men stumble near the van door, confusion plain on his face. Gideon made his decision. He stepped forward. From the far end of the lot, Officer Lena Griggs watched him move. She stood beside her marked animal control vehicle, the leash wrapped securely around her gloved hand. At her side was Morrow. Under the yellow spill of a street lamp, the German shepherd looked carved from shadow and discipline. His black and tan coat was damp with fog, his muscles coiled but restrained, ears upright, eyes fixed on Gideon. At 6 or 7 years old, Morrow carried the gravity of a working dog who understood restraint better than aggression. Lena felt the tension travel through the leash like a live wire. Easy, she murmured, not to stop him, but to anchor herself. Gideon approached the nearest van, raising his hands slightly, palms open. His voice carried calm authority, not threat. Sir, he said to the driver, there's a problem with the paperwork. These folks shouldn't be moved tonight. A man stepped out from behind the van, tall, lean, wearing a volunteer badge and a practiced smile. His hair was dark, beard trimmed close, eyes sharp beneath the friendliness. He spread his hands as if to soothe a misunderstanding. "You're mistaken," the man said. "We're authorized." Behind him, another train horn screamed. The elderly man flinched, fear blooming in his eyes. Morrow let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a growl, but a vibration that spoke of boundaries. Lena felt it through the leash. She stepped closer, keeping her position legal, controlled. The volunteer's smile faltered. The moment stretched, thick with sound and steam. Then, one of the vans lurched forward, tires crunching gravel. Gideon stepped into its path. The driver braked hard, the vehicle rocking to a stop. Papers spilled from the passenger seat, fluttering onto the asphalt. Benefit cards skidded across the ground, flashing under the streetlights like fallen leaves. Everything stopped. The elderly man looked down, then up at Gideon, confusion turning into something like understanding. "They said I'd be safe," he whispered. "You are," Gideon replied. "Stay where you are." From behind, a second volunteer rushed forward, hand outstretched toward Gideon's shoulder. Morrow moved, not to attack, to block. The dog stepped between Gideon and the man with absolute precision, body angled, weight planted. He did not bare his teeth. He did not lunge. He stood, an immovable line drawn in fur and muscle. The volunteer stumbled back, surprised more than hurt, and dropped the folder he was carrying. Documents spilled open. Names, addresses, schedules. The truth lay exposed on wet asphalt. Sirens sounded in the distance, real ones this time, cutting through the train noise instead of hiding behind it. Detective Nia Calder arrived first. Unmarked car sliding into the lot, lights flashing. She stepped out, jacket flaring, eyes already taking in the scene, the blocked vans, the scattered cards, the stunned faces. "Hands where I can see them," she ordered. Behind her came marked units, then another unmarked sedan. Rowan Pike stepped out, pale but steady, legal documents clutched in her hand like a shield. Silas Brandt emerged from the shadows near the building, his silver hair immaculate even now, his expression carefully composed. He took in the scene with a faint, almost regretful smile. "You misunderstand," he began. "This is all voluntary." Naya cut him off, holding up a folder. "We have your accounts, your shell properties, your guardianship filings, and your schedule." Silas's smile faded. Officers moved in, placing cuffs not with violence, but with finality. Silas did not resist. He only looked at Gideon, eyes cold. "You think you've saved them?" he said quietly. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Gideon met his gaze. "No," he said. "I stayed." The elderly group was led away from the vans, wrapped in blankets, guided toward waiting paramedics. Among them was Elowen Hart, her face pale but clear-eyed. She looked at Gideon for a long moment, then reached out and took his hand. "You're not one of them," she said softly. "You're the one who stays." Gideon felt something loosen in his chest. Later, when the lot was empty and the vans were gone, Gideon returned to the bridge. The fog had thinned, leaving the steel bones bare against the night sky. He stood at the railing where it had all begun and pulled a small metal tag from his pocket, scratched, worn, bearing the name of a man who had never made it home. He placed it gently on the cold iron. "I made it," he said. "I'm here." Beside him, Morrow sat, posture straight, eyes forward, a silent sentinel. The train whistle sounded again, long and loud, slicing through the air. This time, it passed through Gideon without pain. It was only sound, and the night, at last, let them stand. Sometimes the miracle is not thunder from the sky or a voice we can hear. Sometimes the miracle is simply that someone stays. In this story, there was no angel descending, no sudden flash of light. There was only a man who chose not to walk away, and a dog who sensed the quiet truth before anyone else did. Maybe that is how God works more often than we realize, not by changing the world all at once, but by placing us exactly where we are needed and waiting to see if we will listen. In our everyday lives, we pass people on bridges of our own, people who are tired, confused, afraid, or unseen. We tell ourselves someone else will help. We tell ourselves we are too late, too small, too broken. But perhaps the calling is simpler than that. Perhaps faith is not about doing something great, but about doing something human, and doing it when it would be easier not to. If this story moved you, let it be a reminder that your presence matters. Your patience matters. Your willingness to stay could be the answer to someone else's prayer. If you believe stories like this still have a place in the world, please share this video with someone who might need it. Leave a comment and tell us what part touched your heart. And consider subscribing to Silent Paws Steady Hearts so we can continue sharing stories of quiet courage, loyal hearts, and hope that does not shout. May God watch over you and those you love. May He give you the strength to notice, the courage to stay, and the peace that comes from knowing that even small acts of love are never wasted.